Look at it. Takes your breath away, doesn't it? Gold. For 5,000 years, men have killed for it. Empires have risen on its back, and nations have burned because they ran out of it. You look at the price of gold today, and you see a number on a screen. You see a chart going up. You see a profit opportunity. But that is not what you are looking at. You are looking at a warning light. You are looking at a thermometer stuck into the mouth of a dying patient. When the price of gold doubles, it doesn't mean gold has become twice as valuable. Gold is a rock. It sits there. It does nothing. It doesn't change. So if the price doubles, it means the money in your pocket has died. It means the empire you live in is bleeding out. History has a script. It has been played out in Rome, in Madrid, in Beijing, in London. And right now, at this very second, the final act is being written for the United States of America. We are standing on the edge of a cliff, and most people are too busy looking at their phones to notice the ground crumbling beneath their feet. Before we walk through the graveyard of empires to show you exactly where we are in the timeline of collapse, I need you to make a choice. Most people will close their eyes and hope for the best. But you are here because you want the truth, no matter how cold it is. So, take a second. Hit that subscribe button, like this video, and in the comments below, answer me this one question. If the dollar loses half its value tomorrow, what do you actually own? Pause. Think about it. Because by the end of this video, that answer might be the only thing that saves you. Fast transition. Sound of swords clashing and fire. Let's go back. Let's go to the greatest empire the world had ever seen before the United States. Rome. Specifically, let's go to the 2nd century. The Pax Romana. The Roman peace. The empire stretched from the sands of Africa to the snows of Scotland. It was invincible. It was eternal. Or so they thought. The currency of Rome was the denarius, a beautiful silver coin, pure, solid. It was the dollar of the ancient world. If you had a denarius, you could buy grain in Egypt, wine in Gaul, or silk in Syria. It was trust, forged in silver. But empires are expensive, very expensive. You have legions to pay, roads to build, bureaucrats to feed, and emperors who want to throw parties that last for weeks. So, what happens when the silver runs out? What happens when you can't mine it fast enough to pay the bills? You cheat. Around the time of Emperor Nero, the administration had a brilliant idea. What if we just put a little less silver in the coins? Nobody will notice. It will still look like a denarius. It will still weigh the same. We'll just mix in some copper. Sound of a coin spinning on a table. It started small. 90% silver. Then 80%. It seemed like magic. Suddenly, the emperor had more money to spend. The soldiers were happy. The people were happy. The economy looked like it was booming. But it wasn't a boom. It was a bubble. By the time we get to the 3rd century, that silver coin was gone. It was a copper slug, washed in a thin layer of silver that rubbed off on your fingers. It was 5% silver. Here is the part the history books often gloss over. The prices. When the merchants realized the coins were junk, they didn't just accept it. They raised the price of wheat. They raised the price of clothing. Inflation tore through the empire like a wildfire. A measure of wheat that cost 7 drachmas in Egypt suddenly cost 120,000 drachmas. Think about that. That isn't inflation. That is destruction. The soldiers, the backbone of the empire, demanded higher wages. But the emperor had nothing to pay them with except more worthless coins. So the soldiers stopped fighting for Rome. They started fighting for whoever would pay them in actual goods. They fought for salt. They fought for land. They fought for the general who promised them loot. The loyalty to the state evaporated. Why? Because the money died. When the money dies, the social contract is broken. When you work all day, and your labor is stored in a coin that becomes worthless overnight, you stop working, or you start stealing. Rome didn't fall because of the barbarians. The barbarians just kicked in a rotten door. Rome fell because they debased their currency to pay for their excesses. They thought they could outsmart the laws of economics. They thought that because they were Rome, the rules didn't apply. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound like a country you know today? A country that spends more on its military than the next 10 nations combined? A country that has normalized trillion-dollar deficits? The parallels are not just similar. They are terrifyingly exact. But Rome was limited. They had to physically melt down coins. It was slow. It took decades. Today, we can destroy a currency with the click of a button. We can print trillions in seconds. The speed of the collapse is no longer generational. It is instantaneous. Now, let's move forward. Let's look at an empire that found too much money. Spain. The 16th century. The Spanish Empire was the first true global superpower. They discovered the New World. And in the New World, they found something that drove them mad. Gold. And silver. Mountains of it. The Incas. The Aztecs. The mines of Potosi. Spanish galleons sailed back to Europe so heavy with treasure that they barely sat above the waterline. Spain became the richest nation on earth. They had more gold than anyone could imagine. By all logic, Spain should have ruled the world for 1,000 years. They should have been economically invincible. But they weren't. In fact, within 100 years, the Spanish Empire was bankrupt. How is that possible? How do you go bankrupt when you own all the gold? Listen closely, because this is the trap the United States is in right now. Spain didn't use that gold to build factories. They didn't use it to improve their agriculture. They didn't use it to innovate. They used it to buy things. They imported everything. Cloth from England. Weapons from Germany. Grain from France. Why make things yourself when you are rich? Why work when you can just spend? The Spanish economy became hollow. They produced nothing. They just consumed. And because there was so much gold flowing into the country, the price of everything in Spain skyrocketed. It became too expensive to do business there. Domestic industry died because it couldn't compete with foreign goods. The gold flowed in from the Americas, paused in Spain, and then flowed right out to the rest of Europe. Spain became a funnel. They were just the middleman for their own wealth. And then, the gold stopped coming. The mines began to dry up. The ships started sinking. And Spain was left with nothing. No industry. No agriculture. And a massive army they could no longer afford. They defaulted on their debt not once, not twice, but 7 times. The richest empire in history became a beggar. This is the curse of unearned wealth. This is the Dutch disease before it had a name. Now look at the United States. For the last 40 years, America has been importing cheap goods from China, cheap energy from the Middle East. America stopped making things. Look at the Rust Belt. Look at the empty factories in Detroit. America became a consumer economy. 70% of the U.S. GDP is consumption. Buying things. Not making things. Buying. Things with what? With the world reserve currency. With the paper gold of the U.S. dollar. America prints dollars, sends them to China, and China sends back toasters, phones, and cars. It works great. Until the world decides they don't want those dollars anymore. Just like the world eventually drained Spain of its gold, the world is currently draining America of its real wealth, leaving it with nothing but paper. When the cycle turns, when the dollar comes home, prices in America won't just rise. They will explode. Because just like Spain, we forgot how to make things. We forgot that wealth isn't money. Wealth is production. Money is just the scorecard. And if you cheat on the scorecard, eventually the game gets canceled. But there is another example. One that is even more frightening because it involves the very invention that keeps the modern world spinning. Paper money. Let's go to China. The Ming Dynasty. Long before Europe even knew what paper money was, the Chinese were using it. They called it flying money. Because it was so light it could blow away in the wind. It was brilliant. Imagine carrying 1,000 copper coins. Heavy, clunky, dangerous to transport. The Ming emperors saw the solution. Print the value on paper. Stamp it with the imperial seal. Decree that this paper is worth 1,000 coins. It was a leap of faith. It required the people to trust the emperor more than they trusted the metal in their hand. And at first, it worked. Trade flourished. Merchants could move wealth across the vast empire without needing wagons of metal. The economy sped up. But absolute power corrupts absolutely. And the power to create money out of thin air is the ultimate power. The Ming government faced wars. They faced rebellions. They had costs. And they looked at the printing blocks. And they asked the fatal question. Why tax the people when we can just print the money? Taxation is painful. It makes people angry. It causes revolts. Printing is invisible at first. So they printed, and they printed, and they printed. They removed the limits. They stopped allowing people to exchange the paper for coin. They made it a capital crime to refuse the paper money. If you didn't accept the emperor's paper, you lost your head. Force. That is the final backing of every failing currency. Violence. But you cannot force the market. The market is a force of nature like gravity. The peasants, the merchants, the scholars, they knew. They saw more and more zeros appearing on the notes. A note that bought a cow last year, now bought a chicken, then an egg, then nothing. The economy of the Ming dynasty ground to a halt. People stopped trading. They reverted to barter. I will give you this bag of rice for that pair of shoes. The complex machinery of the empire broke down because the lubricant, the money, had turned into sand. The Ming dynasty, one of the most sophisticated civilizations in human history, collapsed into chaos. They had to abandon paper money entirely. They went back to silver. They learned the hard lesson that the USA is refusing to learn today. You cannot print value. You can only print claims on value. And if you print more claims than there are real things, the claims become worthless. Fast forward. Let's cross the channel to France. The early 1700s. Meet a man named John Law, a Scotsman, a gambler, a murderer on the run, and the man who became the financial architect of France. France was broke after the wars of Louis XIV. The king was dead, and the debts were massive. John Law walked in with a new theory. He said money shouldn't be based on gold. It should be based on land and trade. He started a bank. He started a company, the Mississippi Company. He told the French people that the company owned mountains of gold in Louisiana, in America. He sold shares. He printed money to let people buy the shares. The stock price went vertical. Servants became millionaires overnight. People were sleeping in the streets outside his office just to buy shares. The word millionaire was invented during this bubble. But there was no gold in Louisiana. It was a swamp. It was a lie. When people realized this, they ran to the bank to get their gold back. But the gold wasn't there. The crowd turned into a mob. John Law had to flee France in disguise to avoid being torn to pieces. The French currency collapsed so hard that for 100 years, the French people didn't trust paper money. They kept their savings in gold coins hidden under their floorboards. Why does this matter? Because today, the entire global economy is the Mississippi Company. We are told that the stock market only goes up. We are told that housing prices never fall. We are told that the debts don't matter because we owe it to ourselves. It is a confidence game, a con. And the moment that confidence cracks, the moment the crowd realizes there is no gold in the swamp, the rush for the exit begins. But the exits are small, and the building is on fire. Now, let's look at the empire that passed the torch to America. The British Empire. The pound sterling. as good as gold. That was the saying. For 100 years, London was the center of the financial universe. If you held a British pound, you held gold. It was the reserve currency of the world. Every central bank held pounds. Every trade deal was settled in pounds. Britain controlled the seas, and they controlled the money. But then came the 20th century. World War I. War is the great destroyer of sound money. Britain had to fight for its survival. They abandoned the gold standard to print money to buy bullets. They borrowed heavily from the United States. They won the war, but they lost the peace. The economy was shattered. They tried to go back to gold at the old price. It was arrogance. They wanted to pretend nothing had changed. But everything had changed. The British economy couldn't handle the strong currency. Factories closed. Unemployment soared. Then came the Great Depression. And in 1931, the unthinkable happened. The Bank of England, the Rock of Gibraltar of finance, defaulted. They suspended the gold standard. The pound crashed. Overnight, the world lost faith in Britain. The sterling bloc fell apart. Nations stopped holding the pound. They started looking for the new boss, the new power, the United States. It didn't happen in a day. It was a slow bleed. But by the time World War II ended, Britain was a debtor nation. They were exhausted. And at the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944, the torch was officially passed. The US dollar became the world reserve currency, backed by gold. The dollar was as good as gold. $35 an ounce. Guaranteed. The British Empire didn't disappear, but it became a secondary power. It became a vassal to the American financial system. The empire fell because it spent more than it earned, fought wars it couldn't afford, and destroyed the integrity of its currency. Are you seeing the pattern yet? Are you seeing the loop? Rome, Spain, Ming China, France, Britain. Every single one followed the exact same trajectory. Sound money, expansion and prosperity. Massive debt, usually from war or luxury. Currency debasement, printing or clipping coins. Loss of faith. Collapse. There are no exceptions. History does not have a reset button. It only has a repeat button. And now, we arrive at the final subject. The biggest empire of them all. The United States of America. The story of the U.S. collapse doesn't start today. It starts in 1971. This is the pivotal moment. The moment the fuse was lit. After World War II, the U.S. owned 80% of the world's gold. They were the king. But in the 1960s, America wanted to do two things. They wanted to fight a war in Vietnam, and they wanted to build a great society welfare state at home. Guns and butter. You can't have both. Not with honest money. So America printed dollars. Lots of them. The French, who are always skeptical of financial bubbles, noticed. President Charles de Gaulle looked at the pile of dollars France was holding. He looked at the U.S. gold reserves, and he did the math. He realized there were more dollars than gold. So he sent the French Navy across the Atlantic. He said, "Here are your dollars. Give us our gold." Other nations followed. The run on the bank had started. America was bleeding gold. 50% of the U.S. gold stockpile vanished in a decade. President Nixon had a choice. Austerity, stop the war, cut spending, recession, or cheat. On August 15, 1971, Nixon went on television, and he temporarily suspended the convertibility of the dollar into gold. Sound of a heavy vault door slamming shut. That temporary measure is now 54 years old. That was the moment the US dollar became a fiat currency, backed by nothing but faith. It was the moment the tether to reality was cut. Look at a chart of US debt. From 1776 to 1971, it is a slow, flat line. From 1971 to today, it is a vertical rocket ship. When you cut the link to gold, you remove the discipline. Politicians no longer had to ask, "Do we have the money?" They only had to ask, "Can we print the money?" And the answer was always yes. For 50 years, the United States has been running the greatest financial experiment in history. Can you borrow forever? Can you consume more than you produce forever? Can you act like the rules don't apply to you forever? The mainstream economists said yes. They said, deficits don't matter. They said, we are the world reserve currency, we have the exorbitant privilege. And for a long time, they seemed right. The US exported inflation. We printed dollars, and the world soaked them up. Why? Because of the petrodollar. A genius system. After the gold window closed, the US made a deal with Saudi Arabia. We will protect you militarily. In exchange, you will price oil only in US dollars. If Italy wanted oil, they needed dollars. If Japan wanted oil, they needed dollars. This created a permanent artificial demand for the dollar. It forced the world to fund the American lifestyle. It was an imperial tax on the entire planet. But every system has a breaking point. And we reached ours in 2008. The global financial crisis. The housing bubble burst. The banks failed. The system died. It actually died in 2008. But the doctors, the central bankers, shocked it back to life with adrenaline. Quantitative easing. QE. A fancy word for printing money to buy your own debt. The Federal Reserve printed trillions. They bailed out the banks. They bailed out the bond market. They told us it was a one-time emergency. They lied. They never stopped. Then came 2020, the pandemic, and they went from emergency mode to insanity mode. In 2 years, the US printed 40% of all dollars ever created in history. Let that sink in. Nearly half of the money supply, created in 24 months. And you wonder why your grocery bill is up? You wonder why you can't afford a house? You wonder why gold is hitting all-time highs? It's not corporate greed. It's not supply chains. It is the debasement of the currency. It is the Roman denarius turning into copper. But here is where it gets dangerous. Here is where the empire falling part begins. The world is watching. The world is not stupid. China sees what is happening. Russia sees it. India sees it. The global south sees it. They see a weaponized dollar. They saw the US seize Russia's reserves over the Ukraine war. $300 billion. Poof. Gone. Now, whether you agree with the politics or not, the financial message sent to the world was chilling. If you don't do what Washington says, your money is not yours. If you are China, holding $1 trillion in US debt, you are terrified. You realize that your savings account is actually a hostage situation. So, what do? You find an exit. You find a neutral asset. An asset that has no counterparty risk. An asset that cannot be sanctioned. An asset that cannot be printed. Gold. Look at the data. Who is buying gold right now? Is it you? Is it your neighbor? No. It is the central banks. In 2022, 2023, and 2024, central banks bought gold at the fastest pace in history. China is dumping US treasuries, selling US debt, and buying gold hand over fist. They are doing it quietly. They are doing it through proxies. But the tonnage doesn't lie. Russia has practically eliminated its dollar holdings. The BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and the new members, are building a parallel system. They are trading in local currencies. China buys Saudi oil in yuan. India buys Russian oil in rupees. The petrodollar is dying. The monopoly is broken. And when the demand for dollars dries up, those dollars have to go somewhere. They will come home. Trillions of dollars, currently held overseas, will flood back into the US domestic economy. And when they do, we will see inflation that makes the last few years look like a picnic. We are talking about the Weimar scenario. We are talking about the Argentina scenario. But in the world's largest economy. Sound of a slow, ticking clock. Let's talk about the double. The title of this video is When Gold Doubles, Empires Fall. Why double? Why is that the magic number? Right now, gold is hovering around $2,500 to $2,700, just based on current market. If it goes to $5,000 or $6,000, it signals a psychological break. It signals that the market has lost faith in the sovereign debt of the United States. It is a vote of no confidence. Historically, when gold revalues upward by 100% in a short period, it marks the end of an era. In the 1930s, gold went from $20 to $35. A 75% devaluation of the dollar. That was the end of the internal gold standard. In the 1970s, gold went from $35 to $850. That was a 2,400% move. That marked the end of the post-World War II order and the birth of the pure fiat era. Now, we are coiling for the next move. And this move will be about the sovereign debt crisis. The U.S. owes $35 trillion. It is adding $1 trillion every 100 days. This is exponential. It is a mathematical impossibility to pay this back. There are only two ways out. Default. Tell the creditors, we aren't paying. This would cause a global depression instantly. It would destroy the U.S. banking system. It is political suicide. Inflate. Print the money to pay the debt. Pay the bondholders with worthless paper. This is what they will do. This is what they are doing. But to do this, they have to sacrifice the dollar. They have to sacrifice the purchasing power of the middle class. They have to sacrifice your savings. When gold doubles to $5,000, it isn't just a number. It means your salary has been cut in half in real terms. It means your retirement fund, invested in stocks and bonds, might be nominally high, but it won't buy you a lifestyle. It means the cost of energy, food, and housing becomes unbearable for 80% of the population. Civil unrest follows. Political polarization deepens. The fabric of society tears. This is what happened in Rome. This is what happened in France. This is what happens when the money dies. Let's look at the psychology of the collapse. Because economics is 50% math and 50% psychology. Money works because we believe it works. It is a shared illusion. When you hand a cashier a $20 bill, she accepts it because she believes she can give it to someone else for groceries. If that belief flickers, even for a second, the currency collapses. Hyperinflation is not a monetary event. It is a psychological event. It is a panic. It is the moment the herd turns. Right now, the average American still trusts the dollar. They complain about prices, yes. But they still keep their savings in dollars. They still sell their house for dollars. They still work for dollars. But the cracks are forming. Look at the prepping movement. It used to be for crazy people in bunkers. Now, suburban moms are canning food. Tech billionaires are buying islands in New Zealand. The ultra-rich are buying farmland. Why is Bill Gates the largest private farmland owner in America? Why is Mark Zuckerberg building a $100 million compound in Hawaii? Do they know something you don't? Or can they just read the balance sheet? They are moving out of paper assets and into hard assets. Land, gold, resources, things that are real. They are front-running the collapse. They are getting out of the dollar before the exit door slams shut. Meanwhile, the average person is being told by the news that everything is fine. Inflation is transitory. The economy is strong. The stock market is at all-time highs. This is the gaslighting of the masses. The stock market is not the economy. In Venezuela, the stock market went up 50,000% while the people were eating out of garbage cans. Why? Because the currency was collapsing. If bread costs $1 today and $10 tomorrow, The revenue of the bakery goes up 10x. The stock of the bakery goes up 10x. But are they richer? No. The numbers are bigger, but the value is lower. That is the crack-up boom. That is what we are seeing in the S&P 500 right now. It is the repricing of assets in a dying currency. Let's talk about the geopolitical angle. War. War is the fastest way to burn money. And the world is on fire. Ukraine. Israel. Tensions in Taiwan. The Red Sea. The U.S. is overextended. We are trying to be the policeman of the world with a credit card that is maxed out. We are funding 2 wars. We are preparing for a third. Every missile we fire costs $2 million. Every tank we send costs $10 million. Where is the money coming from? Borrowed. Printed. During the Cold War, the U.S. was a creditor nation with a manufacturing base. We could afford to outspend the Soviet Union. Today, we are a debtor nation with a service economy. We are trying to fight a Cold War against China, the factory of the world, while we borrow money from them to do it. It is insanity. And China knows it. Sun Tzu said, "The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting." China doesn't need to invade California. They don't need to nuke New York. All they have to do is wait. Wait for the interest payments on U.S. debt to consume the entire budget. Right now, the U.S. government spends more on interest payments than it does on the entire defense budget. Read that again. We spend more paying off the banks and bondholders than we spend on the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines combined. And that is with interest rates at 5%. What happens if rates go to 8%? 10%? The game ends. The math blows up. The U.S. government will have to print so much money just to pay the interest that the dollar will go into freefall. This is the debt spiral. And once you enter the spiral, there is no exit. You cannot tax your way out. If you taxed every billionaire in America at 100%, took every penny they had, it would fund the government for a few months. The hole is too deep. You cannot grow your way out. The debt is growing faster than GDP. So, you print. And that is when the gold price explodes. Gold is the anti-dollar. It is the scorecard of government failure. When gold doubles, it is screaming that the emperor has no clothes. So, what does the transition look like? It won't be Mad Max. At least, not at first. It will look like the 1970s on steroids. Stagflation. High inflation. High unemployment. Low growth. Strikes. Shortages. Energy rationing. Capital controls. The government will try to lock you in. They will bring in CBDCs. Central bank digital currencies. Fed now. Why do they want a digital dollar? Is it for convenience? No. It is for control. If you have cash, you can hide it. You can spend it. You can buy gold with it. If you have a digital dollar programmed by the Fed, they can turn it off. They can put a negative interest rate on it. Spend this money by Friday or it vanishes. They can prevent you from buying gold. They can prevent you from moving your money out of the country. CBDCs are the fence they are building around the burning farm. They want to make sure the livestock, that's you, cannot escape the slaughter. This sounds dystopian. I know. But look at Canada during the trucker protests. They froze bank accounts of people who donated $50. In a Western democracy. If they can do it there, they can do it here. When the currency crisis hits, the gloves will come off. Freedoms you take for granted will disappear in the name of national security and economic stability. Let's focus on the BRICS again. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and now Iran, UAE, Egypt, Ethiopia. They control the oil. They control the food. They control the manufacturing. They control the gold. The G7, the West, controls the debt and the financialization. For 50 years, the G7 dictated the rules. But the commodity superpowers are waking up. They are asking a simple question. Why should we trade our real resources, our oil, our wheat, our rare earth metals, for your paper currencies that are losing value? Why should we accept IOUs from a bankrupt empire? They are moving towards a resource-backed currency, maybe a gold-backed trade note, maybe a basket of commodities. If the BRICS announce a gold-backed currency, even partially backed, the US dollar is finished as the sole reserve currency. Overnight, central banks around the world will dump dollars to buy this new, stable unit. The demand for dollars will collapse. The value will plummet. Import prices in America will double. Gasoline will be $10 a gallon, then $15. Electronics, clothes, coffee, everything you import will become a luxury. The American standard of living, which has been artificially subsidized by the dollar's privilege, will revert to the mean. Americans will realize they are not as rich as they thought. They were just living on a credit card with a limitless limit. And the limit has just been reached. This is the historical pattern. The Portuguese Empire, the Spanish Empire, the Dutch Empire, the British Empire. They all had the reserve currency. They all lost it. And when they lost it, they went through a painful period of decline. Living standards fell. Power faded. The US is next. It is not a matter of if. It is a matter of when. And the when is being signaled by gold. So, let's talk about the timeline. I'm not going to give you a date. Anyone who gives you a date is a charlatan. But I will give you the signs. Watch the bond market. When the yield on the 10-year Treasury spikes and the Fed loses control, that is the bell ringing. Watch the conflict in the Middle East. If the Strait of Hormuz is closed and oil spikes to $150, that is the trigger. Watch the gold price. If it breaks $3,000 and holds, the dam has cracked. We are in the late stages of the fourth turning. A historical cycle of crisis and renewal. Institutions are crumbling. Trust is gone. The old order is dying, and the new one hasn't been born yet. This is the most dangerous time to be alive. But it is also the time of greatest opportunity. Wait, opportunity? Yes. Because wealth is never destroyed. It is merely transferred. In every collapse in history, there were people who saw it coming. There were people who positioned themselves. The Romans who moved their wealth into land and gold before the denarius collapsed, they survived. The Germans who bought foreign currencies or hard assets before the Weimar hyperinflation, they became the new masters. During the Great Depression, the people who held cash and gold were able to buy assets for pennies on the dollar. The Kennedys made their fortune during the crash. The wealth transfer is happening right now. The middle class is being wiped out by inflation. Their wealth is being transferred to the asset holders, to the government, and to the people who understand the game. You have a choice. You can be the victim, or you can be the prepared. You don't need to be a billionaire to hedge against this. You just need to think like a central bank. Get out of debt. Debt is a rope around your neck in a deflationary crash, and it is a trap in a variable rate inflationary spike. Secure your income. Own real things. It doesn't have to be gold bars. It can be skills. It can be a business. It can be land, tools, food security, community. But understand this, the dollar in your savings account is melting. Every day you wake up, it buys a little less. It is an ice cube in the sun. Don't bet your life on it. We have walked through history. We have seen the arrogance of Rome, the greed of Spain, the desperation of the Ming, the hubris of Britain, and the denial of America. The story is always the same. Empires are living things. They are born. They grow. They dominate. They get fat/lazy. They overspend. They debase their money. They die. America is an empire, and it is in the winter of its life. This doesn't mean the United States will disappear from the map. Rome is still there. London is still there. But they are not what they were. The transition from the American century to the multipolar world will be messy. It will be violent, and it will be expensive. When gold doubles, it is the final warning. It is the siren. The system is trying to reset. Gold is the only honest money because it cannot be printed. It is the disciplinarian. It forces governments to be honest. And governments hate honesty. That is why they hate gold. That is why they call it a pet rock. That is why they manipulate the price. But they cannot suppress reality forever. The beach ball is being held underwater. But the arms of the Fed are getting tired. When they let go, or when they slip, that ball is going to rocket to the surface. So, as we close this journey, I want you to look at the world differently. When you see a politician promising free stuff, understand that you will pay for it through inflation. When you see a war starting, understand that it is a raid on your purchasing power. When you see the stock market hitting a new high, ask yourself, did the companies get better? Or did the money get worse? Waking up is painful. The matrix is comfortable. But the matrix is breaking. You now have the knowledge of 2,000 years of history. You can see the pattern. You can see the cliff. Most people will walk right off the edge, staring at their screens, believing the lies until the very moment they hit the bottom. But not you. You are watching this. You are thinking. You are preparing. And that makes you dangerous to the establishment. And vital to the future. Because when the dust settles, when the paper burns, and the empires fall, someone has to rebuild. Someone has to carry the fire. Let it be you. Music swells. Cinematic, hopeful but solemn. Don't let the fear paralyze you. Let it sharpen you. Focus on what you can control. Your family. Your health. Your assets. Your mind. The storm is coming. In fact, the first raindrops are already falling. Look at the price of gold. It's raining. Get your umbrella. We have covered 2,000 years of history in a few minutes. But the story is still being written, and you are the protagonist of your own chapter. If this video opened your eyes, if it made you see the world a little clearer, then do not keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to wake up. We are building a community of critical thinkers here. People who refuse to be victims of history. I want you to be part of it. So, one last time. Check that subscribe button. Turn on the notifications. Because the algorithm hates the truth, and I don't want you to miss what comes next. We have a lot more to uncover. Dark secrets of the economy, untold history, and the roadmap for survival. Thank you for giving me your time. Time is the one asset you can never earn back. Spend it wisely. Stay safe. Stay skeptical. And keep your eyes on the gold. I'll see you in the next video.